I'm John, and my wife is Grace. We're both 34 years old. I'm not overweight, but I could shed a few pounds, and I've always considered myself reasonably good-looking. During my college days, I had a few girlfriends and had no trouble attracting women. But everything changed when I met my future wife in my freshman year. We exclusively dated until the question of marriage came up. And 7 months later, she became my wife. She had many admirers in college and always drew attention from guys. Her presence could instantly light up any room, radiating energy. People admired her playful personality. I believed we were the ideal couple because we loved spending time together. However, the challenge we faced was not having enough time for each other. I work as a systems analyst at a large IT company, and she is a registered nurse in the orthopedic department of a major hospital. My typical work week involves 9-hour days, 6 days a week, and sometimes I have to stay late when dealing with complex or time-sensitive issues. Due to our demanding work schedules, we can only spend time together on weekends. When Grace works the daytime shift, we only see each other in the evenings. However, she's always exhausted and goes to bed around 10 shortly after getting home. To make up for our lack of closeness during the week, we often talk about our fantasies. We both believe these fantasies should stay as just that. Fantasy. She meant everything to me, and she assured me that I was the love of her life. I have no time for infidelity, and she knows how strongly I feel about it. I simply wouldn't tolerate it. Grace works 4 days a week, each shift lasting 13 hours. She alternates between Monday-Thursday and changes shifts every 4 weeks. Shifts typically run from 7 to 8 either during the day or night. Additionally, there's a shift change period that takes about an hour. So she usually gets home around 9:30 in the morning/evening. I've been urging her for the past 2 years to find a permanent job, but she's passionate about what she does and doesn't want to switch careers. So we've learned to cope with her unconventional work hours. When we first got married, we both had student loans. We agreed to pay them off before starting a family. Once the loans were settled, we decided to delay having children until we were comfortably settled in a nice home and neighborhood. 3 years ago, we achieved that goal and decided it was time for her to become pregnant. But she didn't. Today is Monday, and I left work early thinking I had the flu. I texted my wife telling her I was going home sick. She replied advising me to take flu medicine. I asked her which medicine and where to find it. She responded, Tamiflu, and mentioned it was in the medicine container in the second drawer under her dressing table in our bathroom. I simply replied, okay, and headed home. Once I got home, I went into our main bathroom to search for her medication, but instead, I found something unexpected. I checked the drawer she had pointed to, but couldn't find anything labeled Tamiflu. When I opened the top drawer, I found flu medicine and a foil packet of birth control pills. She had already taken the one designated for today. I was completely stunned. She had assured me she had stopped taking the pill over 3 years ago. We had been trying to have a baby for the past 3 years without success. My wife had previously told me that our work schedules were the reason for our difficulties. And eventually, our schedules would align with her menstrual cycle. In the spring, I decided enough was enough, and both of us underwent testing. After multiple tests, our doctor stated that there was nothing wrong with either of us. I looked at the foil packet of pills and wondered if it was an old packet, but I realized that the days of the pills matched the month, and the correct pill for today had already been removed. Today is Tuesday, 18th the month. And 18 pills have been taken, including today's. They were set to expire in 2 years, indicating they must have been refilled recently. Simultaneously, various scenarios raced through my mind. Did Grace truly desire to start a family? Was she involved in a secret affair? Did she have undisclosed health issues? Why did she lie to me? Our bodies were aging, and the longer we delayed starting a family, the more challenging it would become. How should I approach her? I took some Tamiflu and went to bed. The next thing I knew, Grace was waking me up. asking about my well-being and if I needed anything. I felt better and declined any assistance. I couldn't help but feel uneasy that she hadn't shared anything with me, but she didn't say a word. I observed her, and it seemed like she believed I had passed out again. She undressed to take a shower and I noticed that some parts of her body were red. It suddenly occurred to me that she might have had an affair after her shift before coming home. When she worked in the other department, her shift change used to take less than 10 minutes. Why did it now take an hour? She didn't close the bathroom door and I positioned myself where I could see her reflection in the full-length mirror in the bathroom. It seemed like she had spent an excessive amount of time grooming herself. Was this a regular occurrence? I had no idea because I had never observed her like this before. She undressed in our bedroom, and her clothes were scattered where she had left them. I picked up her panties and, yes, they were still damp. I placed them back under her robe and returned to bed. However, I came to understand that she returned to the bedroom after her shower and climbed into bed beside me. This was an unusual time for me to be in bed. Strangely, she didn't attempt to hug or console me, and I remained on my side. By the time I woke up the next morning, she had already left. I phoned my boss and informed him that I was sick with the flu. I had some sick days saved up and needed some time off to figure things out. I reached out to one of my closest college friends who had become a lawyer for advice. I quickly learned that our state had no-fault divorce laws. And since we didn't have any children, we only needed to split our assets evenly. The most significant asset was our house, which had gained some equity that needed to be sold and the proceeds divided. My friend offered to represent me if I chose to file a lawsuit, assuring me it was a straightforward case. That evening, at 8 o'clock, I parked near Grace's car to follow her. We both had iPhones, so I used the Find My Phone app to check her location and saw that she was still at the orthopedic ward. After waiting for 10 minutes, I realized she was on her way, so I called the orthopedic department and requested to speak with her. I was told she had already finished her shift and left. I realized that she had deceived me about the shift change, which had lasted only 10 minutes or less. I continued monitoring the app on my phone, and noticed that the blue dot representing her had stopped in an unfamiliar part of the hospital complex. I left the car and decided to locate her phone, but it proved more challenging than I'd expected. I found a place, but it was on the wrong floor. Finally, after waiting for about 20 minutes, I ended up outside one of the rooms where doctors take breaks during their long shifts. Inside, I could hear people being intimate. To find out who was in that room, I needed to hide. And luckily, I found an open janitor's closet about 50 feet away. After roughly 20 minutes, Grace left the room and headed toward the garage. A little while later, a man came out too. Eventually, he locked the door. I approached him and asked for directions, which he kindly gave. He was a bit taller than me and looked quite attractive. I checked his name tag and saw it read Dr. William. I needed a plan. I called my boss at home and told him that I had the flu, but there was also a pressing personal family matter that required my immediate attention. He understood, having gone through a tough divorce himself a year ago. He said I could take as much time as I needed, but to keep him informed so he could handle work. Next, I phoned my friend Max, who's a lawyer, and explained that I wanted to take legal action against Grace, since she had left our house after our encounter on Thursday night. He agreed to help and asked if there was anything else he could do. Since I was unsure about my next steps, he suggested splitting our finances and canceling our credit cards. Did I have any plans after leaving her? Was there a place for me to go? I hadn't thought that far ahead and admitted it. Max told me to visit his office first thing the next morning. He had experience with this and had a list of tasks for me to complete. Even had a list of hotels with affordable weekly rates. My first tasks included arranging a small shipment with a transportation company to be delivered the next morning. I planned to temporarily store my belongings until I found a more permanent place to live. My next stop was the bank, where I withdrew half of our joint accounts and cancelled our credit cards. I took control of the accounts in my name only and requested new credit cards. At midnight, I disconnected her cell phone after I was legally served that evening. While I was in my computer room, saving important files for the upcoming weeks, Grace arrived home on schedule at 9:30 p.m. We exchanged greetings and she proceeded to shower and go to bed. I also retired to bed early because I had a busy day ahead. Strangely, she didn't notice when I went to bed, and I failed to realize how distant she had become. The following morning, she left the house early, and the movers arrived promptly. I had a checklist of items to take with me, and I had placed stickers on everything that needed to be packed. My car was loaded with suitcases and related computer gear once the movers finished. I went out and purchased a single black rose, symbolizing death, departure, and significant changes in the future. Which in this case meant the end of our marriage. Placing it in the center of the kitchen table, I wrote a brief note that read, "Grace, as you might recall, I called you on Monday informing you I was unwell and going back home. You advised me to take Tamiflu and directed me to its location. However, I couldn't find it in your second dressing table. Instead, it was in the top drawer next to your birth control pills." Suddenly, several pieces of a significant puzzle fell into place. You weren't even trying to have a baby because you were having an affair with a doctor at work. It seems your relationship with Dr. William was more important than our marriage. And I've come to realize it's been going on since you were transferred to the orthopedics department. So many lies. How could you? I believed we had a strong marriage built on trust and love. Now my heart is shattered. I'm sure you knew that once I found out, our marriage would crumble. Well, guess what? In our no-fault state, I don't need evidence of your infidelity, which, by the way, would be quite easy to obtain. I divided our accounts and took my share from the house. Have you noticed that your cell phone and credit cards aren't working anymore? By the way, you should find a new place to live because in 60 days, I'll be putting the house on the market and anything left inside will be donated to Goodwill. Now you're free to do as you please. I wonder, is he married with a family? You should know his wife will find out eventually. What will the hospital say? Remember when I said I wouldn't tolerate infidelity? Consider this a heads up for what might come next in your life. Not your husband anymore, John. I'm leaving my wedding ring here. It's no longer needed. So I left the note with the ring on the table and exited the house. I checked into a hotel with a weekly rate and waited. Grace was served with divorce papers by a deputy sheriff who did such work for Frank in his free time. She apparently had a meltdown and passed out. The doctor had to come out of his room in his underwear to help her. But an hour later, she called furious and demanding to know why I had filed for divorce. I asked her why she'd even posed such a foolish question. I informed her that she'd been unfaithful to me for over 2 years, starting when she began seeing the orthopedist. She inquired about when I discovered her affair, and I explained that it was just last Monday when I stumbled upon her birth control pills while looking for Tamiflu. I heard her sigh on the phone. After that, it all became quite clear. I ended the phone call. It seemed she hadn't read my letter. I didn't get much sleep, but I decided to go to work the following day. I found myself buried under a massive workload that had piled up. With nowhere to go and no one to go home to, I started working 16 hours a day 7 days a week. Max and I spoke frequently, and one day I inquired if the doctor was married. And if so, whether there was a way to inform his wife. Max said he'd consider it. Grace was resisting the divorce. Although I hadn't seen or heard from her, her lawyer was in contact with Max, the hearing date was approaching, and I found myself in the same room as her, though she avoided making eye contact. I wore a suit with a black rose pinned to the lapel. The judge was unsympathetic and didn't favor divorce cases. Grace wanted us to undergo counseling, but Max questioned the point of it. Considering her ongoing affair, I candidly informed the judge that I wouldn't participate in any court-mandated counseling. I didn't care if he threatened me with jail. In my view, my wife had been dishonest, unfaithful and deceitful, and I had no desire to be near her. I conveyed to him that in my opinion, I hadn't done anything wrong, and it was Grace who had broken our marriage vows leading to the divorce. I suggested that she should be the one sent for counseling since she was the one who needed it. I was swiftly found guilty of contempt of court and fined, but I remained unfazed. I was furious, and Max had to escort me out of the courtroom before I said something that would land me in jail. He reminded me that it was just a hearing. I asked Max to check if Grace was avoiding the doctor. I intended to cause significant harm. Max hired a detective who set up a video camera in the doctor's break room and recorded their actions after work hours. Additionally, they caught her bad-mouthing me on an audio tape. Their encounters were explicit, making an X-rated movie seem mild. There was hardly any kissing or physical affection. They were purely physical partners. I inquired with Max about holding the hospital responsible now that we had video proof. He believed we couldn't use the video in court, but leaking it anonymously could tarnish the hospital's reputation and bring unwanted attention. He recommended waiting until after the divorce to send the video to the hospital administrators, the doctor's wife, our friends, and family. It was sound advice because if she got fired before the divorce was finalized, I might have to pay alimony, which I wanted to avoid. Finally, he believed there was too much animosity and our marriage was beyond repair. The next day, the video was leaked from an unrelated anonymous source, causing a major uproar. Grace called me and questioned why I did all of this. I reminded her that there was no proof I had leaked the video and thanked whoever did it. I also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate infidelity, especially when it happened to my face and continued even after I filed for divorce. She had broken 2 marriages. I told her it could have been worse and she agreed. The situation worsened when our family and friends reacted to the video the following day. Everyone supported my side and nobody had kind words for her. Everyone had believed we had a perfect marriage. That was 3 years ago. And I haven't seen or heard from Grace since then. She's been acting evasive and heavily stressed. I remarried a second time to an amazing woman and we now have a 1-year-old daughter. My new wife desires a large family and plans to be a full-time mother, which is exactly what I've always wanted. If you're wondering what happened to Grace and William, their lives took a difficult turn. Grace attempted to communicate with me for nearly a year. Although I'm not entirely sure why she tried, I didn't give her an opportunity to reconcile. Both William and Grace were abruptly terminated from their jobs. William's wife initiated divorce proceedings. Grace could have managed, but then I shared the video with our friends and family, which was the final blow for her. This led her to contemplate starting anew. Had she not contested the divorce, she might not have lost her job. Despite not wanting a divorce, Grace sought counseling, but my strong opposition led her to lose the case in court. Her second mistake was continuing her relationship with William and engaging in an inter-romantic affair with him. I made a wise decision by waiting until our divorce was officially finalized before releasing the video. If I had done it earlier and she had lost her job, I would have been obligated to pay alimony. Eventually, Grace, feeling utterly embarrassed and humiliated, relocated to Oklahoma City and secured employment as a nurse in a doctor's office. Perhaps she's trying to rebuild her life, and I hope she's learned from her mistakes. All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Story 2. Life felt like a dream. At least that's what I believed. I'm Leonardo, and I was married to Clara, the woman I thought was the love of my life. We had a cozy home, a dog, and everything seemed absolutely perfect. Our days were brimming with laughter, tenderness, and deep understanding. Our neighborhood was calm, mostly inhabited by families and a few elderly folks, including Grandpa on the corner. Grandpa Thomas was a kind and always helpful man. He acted like a grandfather to everyone in the neighborhood, sharing stories and always wearing a warm smile. Then one day I came home from work early, eager to surprise Clara with a romantic dinner. I was particularly excited that day, filled with plans for the evening. Our wedding anniversary was just around the corner, and I wanted to make it truly special. On my way home, I made a quick stop at the supermarket to pick up the ingredients for Clara's favorite meal. As I approached our house, I noticed something unusual. Grandpa Thomas was exiting our front door wearing a friendly smile. He bid farewell to Clara with a loving kiss on her cheek. And when he spotted me, he waved with a slightly guilty look on his face. "Hello, Leonardo," he exclaimed, a bit out of breath. "I just shared an old cake recipe with Clara. You know how much she enjoys cooking." Clara had a smile on her face, but I detected a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. A hesitation I'd never witnessed before. "Yes. Grandpa Thomas paid me a quick visit," she added, sounding a tad uneasy. I nodded, trying to ignore the growing unease churning in my stomach. However, as I busied myself with dinner preparations, a peculiar detail caught my attention. A still warm cup of tea on the table and two chairs placed very close to each other. As though they had been engaged in a deep conversation, doubt began to creep into my thoughts. What was Grandpa doing in my house? Why did Clara appear so jittery? I attempted to dismiss these thoughts, convincing myself it was merely my imagination, yet the look I glimpsed in Claire's eyes that day lingered in my mind, and an ominous feeling began to take root in my chest. It felt like I stood on the edge of a precipice with an instinct pushing me toward investigation. However, what I would uncover in the days to come would prove more distressing than anything I could have imagined. On the following week's Monday, as I walked home after a typical workday, a soft song played on the radio, though I could barely hear it. My mind fixated on Clara, on that brief kiss on Grandpa's cheek, on her mysterious demeanor, and on the unsettling sensation that something was amiss. As I passed by Grandpa's house, an unsettling sight brought my heart to a sudden halt. Clara was exiting through Grandpa's gate. In that fleeting moment, my world appeared to come to a standstill. I sounded the car horn at her, attempting to conceal the storm of emotions swirling within me. She seemed taken aback for a second, then flashed a smile and made her way over to the car. "Hey there, sweetheart? What a coincidence. I was just grabbing a slice of the cake from the recipe Grandpa shared the other day. He's quite fond of that cake. You know?" she explained, her face radiating innocence. I tried to return the smile, but something felt amiss. Her eyes lacked the usual sparkle, and beneath her facade was a tension she attempted to conceal. "Sounds good, honey. I'm sure he'll appreciate it." My words flowed mechanically, my attention drawn to something on Clara's shirt sleeve. A tiny, almost imperceptible droplet. My stomach churned. She got into the car, and we engaged in trivial conversation for the remainder of the drive home. But my thoughts were elsewhere. That minuscule liquid droplet, the visit to Grandpa's, the brief kiss, all these elements began to form a picture I was reluctant to acknowledge. It resembled a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that refused to fit together. Upon arriving home, Clara headed straight to the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune. I watched her bewildered, lost in my own thoughts. She appeared unchanged, but something had undeniably shifted. I was determined to uncover the truth, regardless of how painful it might be. Dinner passed in an uneasy silence. And as I retired to bed, a single question echoed relentlessly in my mind. What's really going on? I felt like I was on an irreversible path, and deep down, I knew that whatever I discovered would forever alter my life. The following morning appeared like any other, with routines seemingly back to normal. However, the suspicions that had taken root in my mind prevented me from finding any peace. I understood that I had to uncover the truth, regardless of the cost. My entire history with Clara, The years of love and trust hung in the balance. "Today, I might be a little late coming back from work, honey," I informed Clara during breakfast. "We have an important meeting with a client. Possibly lasting late into the night." Clara glanced at me, mildly surprised, but nodded in understanding. "No problem, darling. I'll prepare something special for dinner. I love you. I love you." Those once reassuring words now felt hollow, like a distant echo. What was love when trust had been shattered? I left work earlier than usual, my heart racing with a blend of fear and determination. I couldn't escape the need to uncover the truth, to witness it firsthand as I neared our home. Knot tightened in my stomach. If Clara wasn't at home, I knew precisely where to look. Grandpa's house. I didn't want to believe the thoughts taking shape in my mind, but the evidence was stacking up: the tiny liquid drop on her shirt, the intimate kiss on her cheek. I couldn't erase those from my memory. I parked the car at a safe distance and silently made my way to our house. It felt as though the entire world had come to a standstill, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own labored and unsteady breathing. Without making a single noise, I carefully opened the door to the living room. What I witnessed left me frozen in terror. There they were. Clara, my cherished wife, kneeling in front of Grandpa with its down, sitting on the couch. It was a scene etched into my memory, an unthinkable betrayal that tore my very soul apart. A surge of anger and the desire to scream and confront Grandpa coursed through me, but I restrained myself. He was frail and elderly, and any physical altercation could have dire consequences. Not to mention what it would do to me. My body quivered and tears flowed down my face uncontrollably. An intense pain gripped my chest, a pain unlike anything I had ever experienced. The image of them in that room, the room we had built together, was a betrayal that defied any words. I retreated silently, my mind swirling with a tumultuous mix of thoughts and emotions. I had unearthed the truth, but it came at a steep price. Trust had been shattered, love tarnished, and my life lay in ruins. I knew I could never look at Clara the same way again. She was no longer the woman I had adored. She had become a stranger, a betrayer who callously discarded our years together. The journey back to the car passed in a haze. I felt shattered, adrift, as if a fundamental part of me had been violently ripped away. The truth lay there exposed and unfiltered, and I understood that everything would forever be different. However, I couldn't simply let it be. My life had been wrecked, and it seemed only fair to shatter theirs in return. They needed to face some consequences. My thoughts turned with a scheme. It was a revenge plan that needed to be as public and humiliating as possible. I aimed to reveal Clara and Grandpa's true selves in a grandiose manner. Days later, wearing a forced smile and carrying a heavy heart, I spoke with Clara, pretending to have forgiven her completely. I suggested that we commemorate our love and the obstacles we'd conquered by hosting a lavish party our wedding anniversary. She hesitated initially, but I managed to convince her, perhaps making her think this could be a chance for redemption. I sent out invitations to all our friends in the neighborhood, neighbors, and family members. Of course, I made a special point to invite Grandpa, underscoring his significant presence. The day of the party arrived and everything was meticulously prepared. The house was adorned beautifully. The food was delectable, and our guests were joyful and eager. Grandpa was in attendance, sporting a cheerful demeanor, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. The moment arrived, and I stood up with a raised glass, my heart racing. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice firm and self-assured. "We are gathered here not only to commemorate our love, but also to celebrate the ideals of truth, integrity, and mutual respect we should always hold for one another." Our friends and family raised their glasses, sporting smiles. But Clara and Grandpa appeared uneasy. But before I make this toast, I continued, locking eyes with Clara and Grandpa. I must unveil a hidden truth that none of us have known. A heavy silence engulfed the room. Grandpa's eyes widened and Clara seemed on the verge of fainting. "Yes, dear friends," I declared, my tone now stern and unwavering. "The reality is that my beloved wife and our esteemed grandpa, whom everyone holds in high regard, have been engaged in an illicit affair unbeknownst to us all. My wife and grandpa have maintained a secretive and scandalous relationship right under our very noses." The room filled with shock and disbelief. All eyes turned to Clara and Grandpa, who appeared pale and horrified. And I believe everyone present deserves to be acquainted with the truth. Grandpa and Clara are not the individuals you believe them to be. I pressed on, my voice resolute. Because trust, respect, and integrity are the foundations we rely on, and they have been fractured. Grandpa attempted to speak, but his words were drowned in sobs. Clara too began to weep. Her tears an admission of her disgrace. "I request a divorce, Clara," I uttered, my voice faltering for the first time. "And I hope you and Grandpa find the life you truly deserve." With that, I departed the room, leaving shock, sorrow, and a sense of betrayal in my wake. I had relinquished the love of my life, but my vengeance was fulfilled. I had laid bare the truth and humiliated Clara and Grandpa in the presence of everyone they knew. Their reputation, image, and standing in the neighborhood would never be the same. It was the least I could do. Story 3: Gather around, folks, because it's time for the tale of my unfaithful ex-wife and how I dealt with the situation. Let's start from the beginning. I began to suspect her infidelity due to various warning signs. She exhibited red flags like frequently laughing and smiling while texting, claiming it was just her mother when I inquired, staying late at work every night and offering flimsy excuses when I called, and her colleagues insisting she had left hours ago when I questioned them. She would dismiss my concerns, chalking it up to office banter. The tipping point came when she supposedly went out to buy milk at 11:30 at night, but didn't return until 2 in the morning. Now, if there's one piece of advice I can offer from my extensive experience, it's this. If you suspect your partner of infidelity, consider hiring a private investigator. They are skilled at their job and can gather evidence that proves invaluable in divorce proceedings. Let's fast forward to her birthday several months later. I can anticipate your question. Why did I wait for months before confronting her, and did it have to be on her birthday? To answer the first query, I needed time to gather substantial evidence for my lawyer and make arrangements to find a new place to live. As for your second question, absolutely. It had to be on her birthday. You see, when I asked her about her birthday plans this year, she insisted I go out of town with my friends since she had to work and didn't want to dwell on aging. That raised suspicions. And when I stumbled upon a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses hidden in my closet, something inside me snapped. So, like any rational man, I pretended to leave for my friend's house, making it seem like I was going out of town. While there, I contacted her mother, father, sister, and several friends, sharing my idea of surprising her with a room filled with party streamers, kazoos, and a large cake adorned with candles. It sounded like a blast, right? Well, words might not capture the experience adequately, but I'll do my best for you. It was 8:30 in the morning, and I quietly gathered everyone just outside our apartment. We squeezed into the elevator, about 8 of us in total, with her mother carrying the cake. And I reminded everyone to maintain hushed tones. I inserted my key and unlocked the door. We crept inside and made our way down the hallway toward the bedroom, each clutching a kazoo, and Mom holding the cake, her face lit up with excitement. As I flung open the bedroom door and we all shouted surprise, it turned out the surprise was actually on us. I walked in on my wife in a shocking position with her lover, who had a wide-eyed look mid-thrust. My mother dropped the cake. My sister screamed and my father began to shout. I pretended to be horrified and her friends attempted to usher everyone out while yelling at her. My now ex-wife was sobbing and screaming, questioning how I could, while her lover desperately tried to put on his pants and hastily exit. Right afterward, Her mom was preoccupied with cleaning the cake off the ground. My sister had to physically guide her out of our apartment to stop her from cleaning. Her dad initially tried chasing the guy, but eventually returned to check on everyone. He looked at me as if he wanted to say, "I'm so sorry," before taking her mom to the car. As for my lovely ex, she essentially blamed everyone in the room. She accused the parents of entering our apartment without telling her, blamed her sister for reasons I couldn't comprehend, and even pointed fingers at her friends for not disclosing the surprise. Didn't make an effort to explain herself to me. Instead, she resorted to name-calling and threw objects at me. It all felt incredibly surreal. I had expected that she would cling to me, trying to prevent my departure and apologizing profusely, similar to what one might see in movies. However, that expectation did not align with reality. I found the woman I had loved for 2 years screaming and hitting me, accusing me of ruining her relationship with another guy. It seemed she had stopped seeing me as her husband and more like a roommate. Strangely enough, it turned out to be one of the best birthday presents I've ever given, in a twisted sort of way. Honestly, in the beginning, it was quite comical. I tried to mask my laughter by pretending to be choked up. After enduring so much betrayal, it felt like I finally had the upper hand and got the last laugh. Plus, thanks to the private investigator I hired, I had evidence that she used my money to fund her affair, hotel stays, dinners, and whatnot. So I did receive some compensation, although she still walked away with half of my life savings. But considering my financial situation back then and how I've progressed since, that amount is almost laughable now. However, the reality eventually hits you. Your marriage is over, the woman you loved has betrayed you, and the last 2 years of your life feel like a bit of a waste. Ultimately, it's not about the money. I genuinely believed I loved this girl. So I couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with me and if anyone could truly love me. Additionally, I had developed a close relationship with her dad, who had taken me under his wing as a father figure, which was especially meaningful since my own father had left when I was young. I still keep in touch with him, share my achievements with him, and visit when I can. Divorce is never a pleasant experience, and my advice to young folks in love is not to rush into things. Take time to truly get to know each other. Live together for 3 to 5 years before making any big decisions. I wish someone had given me that advice and urged me to think about what I was doing. Also, the old saying about judging someone by how they treat their parents is absolutely true. She was unkind to her parents, which should have been a significant red flag. As for her, the last I heard, she had moved in with the guy, or at least I believe it was him. She got pregnant, and if they're still together, she probably has the child by now. At this point, I couldn't provide any more details. I genuinely hope she's found happiness, even if I'm not the one providing it for her.